Hey everybody, back with another Polars tutorial. Hope you're all doing real well. Today I'll be continuing my discussion from my last video on using date-time variables. We created a date-time variable in our last video, this date column right here. And if you need a quick review, or if you didn't watch that video on how to create date-time variables, it's very easy. All we do is we do in a with column statement, we do pl.date, and then we add in arguments for year, month, and day. So year, month, and day. And that will create a formatted date for us that we can use to do all sorts of temporal analyses. And so I dropped the component information because, once we have our date variable, that's really all we need. And so what we're going to do in this demonstration is we're going to calculate a duration column that will represent the time until an event occurs. So in this example, we're going to be using the earthquake data, the same data from the last video. And each record on this data set represents an earthquake. So it has an earthquake ID, I suppose, tsunami flag, a magnitude of the earthquake, the country in which it occurred, and then the date of the quake. And so what we want to do is calculate the amount of time that occurs between, say, this date and this date, and that'll give us the amount of time that elapsed until this earthquake occurred. And so there's various ways to do this in data science packages. The implementation in Polars is through the use of a special, or maybe not a special, but a variable type called a duration variable type. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to use our date variable to create a duration variable. And duration variables in Polars represent the amount of time between two dates. So the amount of time, for example, between this formatted date and this date. And we create these date-time variables, or I'm sorry, these duration variables by taking the difference, or by subtracting one date from another date. So these duration variables are really easy to make. And so on these data, of course, it will be the amount of time until an earthquake occurs. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to use this duration variable to get the number of days that elapsed until an event occurred. There's various types of information you can get, or I guess time decrements you can get from a duration variable. You can get days, you can get hours, you can get minutes. But we'll take a look at that. And so the first thing we need to do is find a way to subtract, is to go backwards basically and subtract this date from this date, and this date from this date, and then this date from this date, and so on across all these. And we only want to be doing that within countries too. And so that's kind of difficult, especially if you're new to longitudinal analysis or new to programming, because we're used to our various dates, the various values that we need for our computations, arrayed across columns. So each date would have its own column, is, how a lot of folks, including myself on some occasions, would prefer to have it. So, how do we do that? And so Polars offers just a lot of really easy methods to do that. The method I'm going to be using is the diff method. And I'll show you what the diff method syntax looks like first, then we'll talk about what it actually does. And so we're going to use the diff method to subtract a date from a date in the previous record. And so we do with columns, because we're going to create a new column. And then we're calling this duration column that we're going to create time until event. And we do pl.call, and then we're going to point to the column we want. And then we do .diff, and then we're going to say over country, because we only want these computations occurring within countries, not across countries. And so what diff is going to do is it's going to take this value and it's going to subtract it from the value before. And it's going to do the same right here. It's going to take this value and subtract it from the value before. And the first record is going to have a null on it because this record can't subtract anything from anything prior. It's the first record in the data frame, or it's the first record in this distinct group, this group being the country. And so if we were to do diff2, the first two records would be null, and this record right here would subtract from the value 2 records up. But here we're only subtracting from the previous record, but that's just an example of how diff works. It's a really, really powerful, really, really useful tool. And so we'll go ahead and just run that. before we get to unpacking that, and we'll take a look at what our duration column looks like. And again, when we subtract dates from one another in polars, what it's going to return is a duration type field. Yeah, let's get rid of this stuff. Oh, wait. Did I get rid of anything up here? Yeah, I did. Okay, and so here's our new time until event column. And we know it's a duration column because in the data type indicator beneath the variable name, we see that it's a duration column. And we see that it's expressed in this notational format where there's a D suffix at the end. I believe that means days. So we can see that, you know, the difference between the amount of time that occurred between this date and this date was 98 days. And so this is probably enough for us to kind of ascertain what it is we really need here from these data. But if we wanted to, say, format these and put these into a report, we'd probably want to get rid of this day suffixing, or we might want this expressed in another time decrement altogether. So to unpack the duration columns, shoot. There's a variety of methods to do this. So I'm going to create a new variable called days until quake, and we're going to do pl call, and then we're going to point to our new time until event, our duration column, this guy. And we're going to do .dt because it's a date time method, and then .total days. And so that'll extract the number of days. That'll express that duration column in terms of days instead of that notational format that it's in. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so now we see it's out of that notational format, and it's in a format that expresses the amount of time until an earthquake occurs in terms of the number of days. Okay, guys, so that's all there is to getting into calculating the time until an event occurs using a duration column in polars. As you can see, it's quite easy. All you need to do is subtract two dates from one another, get a duration type column, and then you can use various methods to unpack that into a given time decrement. So this is the second part of a series that I'm doing on date time methods. The next video I'm going to do is I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to calculate the time until an event occurs, but I'm going to calculate the time that elapses between each tsunami occurs, which is a little bit different because there are records that don't have tsunamis and records that do. So we need to find a way to get the time that elapses between this event and this event, and this event and this event, and so on, which is a little tricky to do. But I'll go over the strategy I use to do that. But until then, I'll see you all soon.